I often think back to the very first day I held Daniel in my arms, a tiny, fragile being wrapped in a thin hospital blanket, his small fists clenched as though he already knew the world could be a hard place. And in that moment, I swore silently to myself that no matter what happened, no matter how difficult life became, I would protect him with every ounce of strength I had. That promise became the foundation of my life, a vow I repeated countless times through years of sacrifice and struggle, because Daniel was not just my son, he was my reason for breathing after his father walked out on us when Daniel was barely 2 years old, leaving me with unpaid bills, sleepless nights, and a hollow ache in my chest that no amount of tears could fill. And while some women might have collapsed under the weight of abandonment, I hardened myself, choosing instead to pour all my love and effort into raising Daniel, believing he would one day recognize that everything I did was for him. In those early years, money was always short, so I took on 2 jobs, working mornings at the bakery kneading dough until my hands ached, and nights at the diner carrying heavy trays until my back screamed in protest. All the while making sure Daniel never went to bed hungry, never missed a school trip, and always had clothes that were clean even if they weren't new. And though I was often exhausted to the point of tears, there was a strange pride in seeing him smile, in hearing his laughter echo through our small apartment, because those sounds reminded me why I endured sleepless nights and aching bones. When other mothers had husbands to lean on, I had only my determination. Patching Daniel's shoes when they wore thin, teaching myself how to fix leaking pipes and broken chairs, and sometimes sitting at the kitchen table long after midnight, staring at unpaid bills and wondering if I had the strength to keep going. But then I would hear him breathing softly in his sleep, his little arm wrapped around a tattered teddy bear, and my resolve would harden again. Daniel was a bright child, full of curiosity, always asking questions about the stars, the trees, the way things worked, and I encouraged him in every way I could, buying used books from thrift shops, spending what little extra money I had on second-hand science kits, and cheering from the sidelines at every school play, every soccer match, no matter how tired I was from working double shifts. I still remember his 8th birthday, when I couldn't afford the toy robot he had dreamed about for months, so I stayed up all night stitching together a costume from old clothes, turning him into his favorite comic book hero. When he woke and saw me standing there in my homemade creation, he laughed so hard he nearly fell off the bed, hugging me tight and whispering that I was the best mom in the world. And in that moment, all the exhaustion of the past years seemed to vanish. Those were the moments that kept me alive. The small victories, the little affirmations that I was doing something right. But raising a child alone is never easy, especially when the child begins to grow into a teenager and the world begins to whisper in his ear. Suddenly, I wasn't the center of Daniel's universe anymore, and though I tried to understand that it was natural for him to seek independence, it hurt more than I admitted when he rolled his eyes at my advice or brushed off my concern. Still, I stayed patient, reminding myself that he would come back, that deep down he knew my love was unshakable, and so I continued sacrificing, skipping new shoes for myself so he could attend a summer camp, working overtime so he could go on the school trip abroad, pretending not to hear the other kids whisper that his father didn't love him, because I wanted him to believe he lacked nothing. Through the years, our bond was tested in countless ways, yet I always clung to the memory of that little boy clutching my hand at the park, asking if I would always stay with him, and I always answered yes, even if inside I sometimes doubted whether I could keep carrying the weight of life alone. I remember the nights we sat on the balcony of our apartment, eating simple meals of rice and beans, because that was all I could afford, while he talked about his dreams of becoming someone important, of building a future where I wouldn't have to work so hard. I would smile, stroke his hair, and tell him I believed in him completely. And I did. I believed so fiercely that it became my shield against despair, convincing myself that one day all my sacrifices would be worth it. When Daniel grew into a man who remembered the mother who never gave up on him. There were times when neighbors told me to remarry, to find someone to share the burden with. But I refused, not because offers never came, but because I couldn't risk bringing someone into our lives who might hurt Daniel or make him feel abandoned again. In my mind, my job was to give him stability, even if that meant enduring loneliness myself. Over the years, loneliness became my silent companion, sitting with me at the kitchen table after Daniel had gone to bed, whispering doubts into my ear, but I silenced those doubts with the rhythm of work, with the constant motion of survival. When Daniel entered high school, I saw glimpses of the man he would become: tall, confident, admired by his peers, and though sometimes he pushed me away with harsh words or cold silences, I told myself it was just a phase, that all teenagers acted that way, and so I endured, believing that love was patient and that one day, he would look back and realize how deeply I had loved him. I worked overtime to buy him a decent suit for his prom. I cheered at his graduation even though I had come straight from a 12-hour shift with blistered feet. And when he left for university, I stood at the train station holding back tears, waving until the train disappeared, whispering to myself that all the sacrifices had been worth it. In the quiet that followed his departure, I learned to live with silence, with evenings where the only sound was the ticking of the clock and the hum of the refrigerator, but I kept my spirits alive with the hope that one day he would call, visit, or simply say thank you. And sometimes he did. Short calls, hurried visits, quick words of appreciation, but I cherished them as if they were gold. To me, Daniel was still the little boy I had promised to protect, the one whose laughter had kept me alive through years of struggle, and I carried that love in my heart like a torch, believing it could never be extinguished. Little did I know that the very love I had poured so completely into him would one day be turned against me. That the child I had sacrificed everything for would one day look me in the eye and tell me I was not wanted. And though even now I struggle to comprehend it, I realize that part of the pain lies in knowing that I built my entire life around him, only to discover too late that he had built his around someone else. Well, only to discover too late that he had built his around someone else. And the first time I truly felt that reality slam into me was on the night I stood in my small kitchen, carefully pressing a dress I had chosen for my daughter-in-law, thinking I would be joining them for dinner as part of the family, only for my phone to buzz with a message that would unravel years of sacrifice in an instant. I still remember the exact words glowing coldly on the screen. "Don't come tonight. You're not wanted here." And for a long moment, I just stood there frozen, the iron hissing against the fabric as if mocking my stillness, my heart pounding so loudly I thought it might burst, because it was not from a stranger, not even from Claire, but from Daniel, my son, the boy I had once sworn to protect. I tried to convince myself it was a mistake, perhaps sent in anger or even typed by someone else. But the more I stared at his name on the screen, the more undeniable it became, and in that moment I felt something inside me shatter. My first instinct was disbelief, followed by a wave of desperation that sent me grabbing my coat and leaving the house, my feet carrying me almost mechanically toward the restaurant where I knew they were dining, because some stubborn part of me refused to accept that my son truly meant those words. The night air was cold, biting against my skin as I walked quickly, clutching my bag close, whispering to myself that when I saw him face to face he would explain, maybe even laugh it off as a joke gone wrong, because how could he, the child I had given everything for, truly want me gone? When I finally reached the restaurant, I stood outside for a moment, staring through the wide glass windows at the warm glow inside, and there they were, Daniel tall and handsome in his crisp shirt, Claire radiant beside him, and her parents seated proudly across, all of them laughing, their glasses raised in cheer, the scene so intimate, so complete, that it looked like a perfect picture of family life, except I was nowhere in it. My chest tightened painfully. Yet I forced myself to open the door, the sound of clinking silverware and cheerful chatter washing over me as I stepped inside, my heart thundering with every step toward their table. When Daniel's eyes finally met mine, instead of the warmth I had hoped for, his expression hardened instantly, his laughter dying on his lips, and Claire leaned close to him, whispering something quickly into his ear, her hand brushing his arm possessively, her smile curving in a way that felt sharp rather than kind. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor, and walked toward me with a face that was cold, unrecognizable, and when he stopped in front of me, his voice was low but laced with steel. "Didn't you get my message? You're not welcome here. Leave." Those words cut deeper than any wound I had ever endured, and though I tried to speak, my voice came out as a broken whisper. "Daniel, it's me, your mother." But he did not flinch, did not soften, only stood there with eyes like stone, and behind him I could see Claire's father smirking, clearly entertained by my humiliation, while Claire herself avoided my gaze, her lips pressed into a tight line that seemed both triumphant and dismissive. For a heartbeat, I considered fighting, begging, explaining that I had dressed up and come only to share in their joy, but the weight of all those staring eyes around the restaurant Strangers watching this painful scene unfold crushed whatever words might have escaped me, and so I simply turned, my legs trembling as I walked out, the sound of their laughter, louder now, or perhaps it only felt louder, chasing me out into the cold night like daggers piercing my back. The walk home felt endless, every step heavy with disbelief, my mind replaying his words over and over, as if trying to make sense of something senseless, and by the time I reached my door, my body felt drained of all warmth, my hands trembling as I fumbled with the key, and once inside, I collapsed onto the chair where I had been ironing earlier, the half-finished dress still draped across the table, mocking me with its neatness, as though waiting for a celebration that would never happen. That night I did not sleep. Instead, I sat in the dim glow of the lamp, staring at the silent phone, waiting for a call that never came, tears streaming down my face until there were none left. Only a hollow ache in my chest and the haunting realization that something between us had shifted irreparably. Yet the silence of that night was only the beginning of a deeper, more suffocating loneliness that seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction, because in the days that followed I found myself waiting for the phone to ring, waiting for the doorbell to chime, waiting for Daniel to walk through the door with an apology or at least an explanation, but the only sounds that filled my house were the creaks of old wood and the ticking of the clock that seemed to mock my hope with every passing second. And as hours turned into days and days blurred into weeks, I began to realize that he would not come, he would not call, and that realization sat on my chest like a stone pressing the breath out of me. I tried to distract myself with chores, scrubbing floors that were already clean, rearranging cupboards, folding and refolding laundry, until the fabric felt thin beneath my fingers, but nothing could silence the echo of his rejection. Nothing could erase the memory of his eyes when he told me to leave as though I were a stranger intruding on his life. Nights were the worst, for the darkness seemed to magnify every memory, and I would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the years when he was small and would run to me with scraped knees or childish laughter, wondering how that boy had grown into a man who looked at me with disdain. And sometimes I would whisper his name into the stillness, as though speaking it aloud might bridge the distance between us, but the only answer was silence. My neighbors began to notice the change in me. Mrs. Fletcher from next door would pause at the gate and ask gently if I was all right. Her eyes filled with concern, and though I forced a smile and nodded, I knew she could see through the mask, for grief is not so easily hidden. Worse still were the whispers that began to drift back to me, carried by acquaintances in heard conversations at the market, that Claire had been telling people I was difficult, that I was meddling in their marriage, that Daniel had to choose between peace in his home and my constant interference, lies that cut me afresh each time they reached my ears, because I knew I had never intruded, had only ever wanted to help, to support, to love. And yet, as those stories spread, I noticed the subtle shifts in how people looked at me, pity from some, suspicion from others, as though they wondered if perhaps I truly was the bitter mother-in-law they had been led to believe. Each encounter left me shrinking further into myself, avoiding gatherings, declining invitations, retreating into the safety of my home, where at least the walls did not judge me, though even they seemed to whisper with memories of happier times. On Sundays, when I used to set the table for Daniel, and cooking his favorite dishes, and waiting for him to come bounding through the door, I now found myself staring at the empty chair across from me, unable to bear the sight of it. So I stopped cooking altogether, surviving on tea and toast. Because what was the point of preparing meals when there was no one to share them with? My health began to waver under the strain, my body growing weaker, my reflection in the mirror showing lines of sorrow etched deeper each day, and sometimes I would catch myself speaking aloud as if he were still there, telling him about small things. The weather, a program on television, a memory from years past, only to realize I was talking to the silence, and the weight of that loneliness would crush me all over again. Yet perhaps the cruelest part was the way memories would ambush me without warning. A glimpse of a child in the park would drag me back to the days when Daniel clung to my hand. The smell of roasted chicken in a neighbor's oven would remind me of the dinners I used to make him. The sound of laughter from a passing family would twist the knife in my chest, reminding me of all that I had lost. The holidays were unbearable. I decorated the house out of habit, stringing lights that twinkled mockingly, setting out the old ornaments we once hung together, but the rooms remained hollow, the laughter absent, and when New Year's came, I sat alone at midnight with only the echo of fireworks outside, whispering a wish that the coming year might heal the wound, though deep down I feared it never would. And as the seasons changed, so too did the world around me. Spring flowers bloomed and withered. Summer heat gave way to autumn chill. But inside me, time seemed to stand still, every day blurring into the same gray ache of absence. I thought often of confronting him, of walking to his house and demanding answers, but each time I imagined his face, cold, unyielding, dismissive, I lost the courage, terrified of hearing once again that I was not wanted. And so I remained trapped between hope and despair, clinging to memories even as they sliced me open, longing for a son who seemed to have vanished into someone else's life, someone else's family, leaving me behind like an old coat no longer needed. Yet even in the depths of that loneliness, a quiet voice inside me kept insisting that I could not go on like this forever, that if Daniel would not come back to me, then I would have to find a way to come back to myself, though at first I had no idea how. It began not with some grand decision, but with a small, almost accidental step when Mrs. Fletcher knocked one morning, holding a flyer for a community center across town, saying they offered classes and gatherings for people of all ages, and though my instinct was to refuse, to retreat back into the comfort of my sorrow, something in her eyes, an earnest hope that I might find even a sliver of joy, made me nod, and so the following week I found myself walking hesitantly into that bright building filled with unfamiliar faces. At first I felt out of place, my hands fidgeting with the strap of my bag, certain that everyone could see the heaviness I carried. But then a woman with silver hair and a smile as warm as sunlight greeted me, asking my name as though it truly mattered, and just like that, a thread of connection began to weave itself into the tattered fabric of my days. I signed up for a simple art class, thinking it would be something to pass the time. But as the days turned into weeks, I discovered a kind of quiet healing in the act of holding a brush, in the way colors blended across a canvas, allowing me to express emotions I could not put into words. Each stroke felt like a release, a small letting go of the bitterness that had knotted inside me. From there, other doors open. I joined a book club where stories carried me into worlds beyond my pain. I attended group lunches where laughter bubbled freely, and, to my surprise, I found myself laughing too, the sound rusty at first but growing stronger with each gathering, as though my voice was remembering joy after so long in silence. Slowly, the house that had felt like a prison began to change. I brought home small crafts from the center, filling shelves with pieces that reminded me, not of what I had lost but of what I was beginning to build anew, and for the first time in years I caught myself humming while making tea, the melody soft but undeniable. The seasons seemed brighter too. Spring blossoms glowed with a freshness I had not noticed before. Summer air carried not just heat but possibility, and though Daniel remained absent, the ache he left behind no longer consumed every corner of my heart, for I had discovered that life, stubborn and resilient, insists on continuing even when we feel broken. Friends at the center became a kind of family, not replacing the one I had lost but offering a different kind of belonging, one built not on blood, but on shared kindness, and through them I learned that love can be found in unexpected places. That connection is not limited to the bonds we are born into, but can be created anew if we are willing to reach out. I even began volunteering, helping serve meals to others who were lonely or struggling, and in their eyes I saw reflections of my own past sorrow, but also the possibility of change, the proof that healing is not only possible but contagious, spreading from one heart to another like light chasing away shadows. There were still nights when the silence pressed heavy, when memories of Daniel and the way he had once been clawed at my chest, but those moments no longer defined me. Instead, they became softer, less jagged, as though time had sanded their edges, and I learned to let them exist without letting them destroy me. In rediscovering myself, I found strength I did not know I had, a strength not born of pretending I was never hurt, but of surviving despite it. And in that strength I began to see glimpses of the woman I had once been before sorrow tried to claim me. Resilient, capable, and, perhaps most importantly, worthy of joy. Yet perhaps the most profound lesson of all came quietly, not in the laughter of new friends or the vibrant colors of my paintings, but in the still moments when I sat alone in my chair with a cup of tea, gazing out the window at the changing sky, realizing that for the first time in a long while, I was not waiting for a call, not waiting for footsteps at the door, not waiting for Daniel to appear and mend what he had broken, because I had come to understand that some wounds are not meant to be healed by the ones who inflicted them, and some chapters are not meant to be rewritten but closed. I had carried the weight of his rejection like a chain, believing that only his love could free me, but in truth the key had always been within me. In the choice to value myself even when he did not, in the courage to build a life that did not depend on his approval. That realization did not erase the pain, nothing ever could, but it transformed it into something bearable, something I could carry without breaking under its weight. And in that transformation, I found peace. Looking back, I saw not only the night of humiliation at the restaurant, not only the long months of silence, but also the years of sacrifice, the laughter we once shared, the countless acts of love that no rejection could erase. And I understood that while Daniel may have turned away, my love as a mother was not wasted, for it had shaped him, it had given him the foundation to stand on, even if he chose to stand far from me. And so I no longer cursed his name in the darkness, no longer asked, why, with tears burning my eyes. Instead, I whispered blessings into the quiet, hoping that wherever he was, he found happiness, not because he deserved it more than I did, but because letting go of bitterness was the only way for me to stay whole. My story did not end in abandonment but in resilience, not in despair but in the rediscovery of dignity. And though I may never sit across from my son at a dinner table again, I sit across from people who see me, who value me, who welcome me without condition, and that is a kind of family too. Life has taught me that betrayal, even from those closest to us, does not define our worth. It merely tests our strength, and strength is not loud or showy but steady, the quiet decision each morning to rise, to breathe, to keep moving forward. So when I stand at the mirror now, I no longer see only the lines carved by sorrow, but also the resilience etched by survival, and I no longer measure my life by what I lost but by what I found in the ruins. Courage, self-respect, and the unshakable truth that I am enough. If Daniel ever returns, my arms will be open, for a mother's love does not vanish, but if he does not, I will still be whole, still be living, still be shining in the small ways that matter. And that is the victory no one can take from me. In the end, my story is not just one of rejection, but of rebirth. Proof that even when those we love most turn away, we can rise again not as the person we were, but as someone stronger, wiser, and unbreakably alive.